Hello there. Happy Wednesday to you. How are you doing? I am so excited to finally have my voice back. Oh my heavens, I can't believe how many people around the world have been knocked on their bums from this flu epidemic. And it got me too. I was not in a good way. So I've missed sharing with you, and I'm so glad to be back and not coughing every 5 seconds. So did you listen to that radio interview? Just an hour ago, I posted the link so you could listen to the interview I did with Roméo Cournal, who is this intuitive life coach here in the French Riviera, who works around the world helping people become free from the mental slavery. So, you know, it's in the words of Bob Marley that we realize that only we can free ourselves. You know, all of us coaches, healers, light workers, and mentors around the world, we offer our best tips and support and love. And many, many opportunities are given to us to kind of activate your superpowers. But ultimately, it's you that has to really step up and own it and claim it. So I hope you got a chance to listen to that. Salut, Roméo. So Roméo is here. And maybe you even actually watched the version that I did with Roméo in French, which was quite a trip. So you can see me stumbling around, but Roméo was such a good sport doing this interview in English for me and for this tribe. So I think this topic of how we ourselves become enslaved, whether we were kind of knocked and beaten by life to such a point where we feel truly helpless, or we just haven't yet owned the fact that this is our life. And I don't know if you can really get your head around that idea that there comes a moment when you claim it, like claim your life, which means taking responsibility for your life and the way your life looks. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like a mystical journey when we really start to realize that we can't blame anybody else. And we can't live up to anybody else's ideal. We've really got to kind of tap into our own heart and soul and spirit and really decide how we're going to live. So what questions do you have for me or Roméo? I wish I was on one of my other platforms so that I could invite Roméo to be on camera. You know, they have that funky little feature on some of our other platforms, but not here, not today. I'm on just a basic connection. I have been recording today. Today, I was just rejoicing in having a voice. So I recorded a bunch of videos because we've got some new programs coming up and new books coming out. And I'm just super excited. So what questions do you have? What areas in your life have you recognized that you were your own jailer? It's like when we kind of realize that we're in prison, we're the ones imprisoning ourselves, and we're also the warden who holds the key to unlock that jail cell. It really becomes an opportunity for us to look at life in a whole new light. One of the other contributing authors to Time to Rise is Yvette Taylor. And this week, well, actually today, marks the start of a new study that she's doing, which is about the energy alignment method, which I wrote about in my book, I Love You, Me. I wrote about Yvette's energy alignment method, and Roméo and I talked about it as well, because it's really a methodology for finally allowing you to modify, tap into, and own your own presence in the world. And by presence, I mean your energetic presence, right? Like the energy of who you are and understanding that we are not the stuff that's held in our mind. We are not all of those past experiences. Even though, yes, we have a soul which really carries all the programs and the imprints from our family, from our history, carried down through the generations and accumulated in this lifetime. Even though there is sort of this overlay, if you will, of the soul, we can transcend that. And the way that you transcend past karma or drama or trauma is by accessing your spirit. Because this higher self or spirit or sovereign self or God self, whatever you want to call it, there's actually another part of you that is still tapped into that divine source God consciousness. And when you decide to line up your life with your higher self, that's when you can modify anything on this earth plane, including the karma and drama and trauma that you may have accumulated in your soul. And the way that that manifests in the day-to-day, here and now, is in our physical experience. And the physical experience isn't just like the flesh and blood and bones. It's also our energetic presence, our energetic experience. And so a lot of us talk about this idea of you walk into a room and you can instantly tell if somebody's just gotten in a fight and they're trying to hide it. You walk in, you feel this twinge. For all of my empaths, my empathic people who can feel the energy and suffering of other people. Romeo and I were just joking about this, that, we're very sensitive even to the energy around us in the city. And Romeo was saying, I can be walking through Cannes and you step just a couple of steps and all of a sudden the energy has changed. And he's like, and now I know I'm in Lucani. But how is it that you can feel that energy? And what Yvette was sharing in today's startup session of this energy alignment method study is just really giving us a better understanding of, how our head, meaning our brain and our thoughts, they influence the energy and the electricity, literally, the energy and electricity of your brain. We also have the energy and the electricity of the heart, which is transmitted into the environment for 10, 20 feet, probably much further. It's just that scientists have only been able to measure it about 20 feet out, but we know that the heart radiates this energy that can go far and wide. One of our other authors, Gita Vinter, she talks about how you can send energy from your heart across a love bridge to a loved one who could be on the other side, meaning they've passed away, or they could be on the other side of the world. And then, this third energy center that Yvette was talking about today, so our head, we have our heart, and we have what's called the hara. In Chinese medicine, we're always talking about this lower dantian. You might call it the solar plexus, the gut, that chakra that's tied to our will and motivation and our creativity, and yes, that passionate, erotic energy of creation. And we can really send messages from these three areas. When you say you have a gut instinct, or some comment really felt like a punch in the stomach, or we feel like our heart is heavy or our heart is light, or we have this sense where we're like, I'm just so muddled in my head. All of those sensations or feelings actually have a corresponding energy. And that energy and information, if you will, these waves of electricity, they actually can also impact our physical health and physical well-being. And it can be very easy for us to feel like we're kind of the victim of our circumstance. Because when your body feels like it's just being dragged down or under attack, and when your mind is so muddled, or you're around people whose energy is just like totally messing with you, you can feel a bit disempowered. And so all of this series of these books and these interviews and Yvette's training program is all about teaching us how to reclaim our power in the present moment so that we can really start to transform the way our life is showing up for us. And that can be in our physical health, our emotional or our mental well-being, our relationships, our job. And when it comes to relationships, the interview that I did with Romeo is, you can also watch the video version of it, and you can watch a bit of it in French. But the interview that we talked about is also includes one of Romeo's specialties, and that is helping people recognize when they're in, when they need to get out of, and what the keys are to a toxic relationship. So this stuff is like so good, because many of us in relationships find ourselves doing the same thing over and over again. And, what do they say that is? Insanity. Trying the same thing over again, hoping for a different result. We blame that partner. No, it was their fault. No, this partner was this, that partner was that. The common denominator is us. And so I'm really excited that Romeo and his specialty of helping people through their toxic relationships, he has a whole program. Right now it's in French. We want it in English too, because once you recognize some of these patterns, yes, Janet, she says, it's crazy. Looking for a different result. Help us, Lord. Well, sometimes the Lord is trying to help us by sending us these resources that teach us that we are in control of how we perceive situations. But one of the things it requires is absolute emotional intelligence and emotional integrity. That is knowing which emotions are yours and owning it, even if it's a little messy. And it requires intense emotional honesty. And that is that true willingness to call it what it is. Again, even if it's messy or scary or painful. Because it's only in first being aware and second owning up to our responsibility. This isn't about blame. Okay, so remember, this is not about blaming you or even blaming your parents or the alcoholic that you were with, or we as human beings, we take on certain patterns, we get programmed, we do our best to survive. But some of the adaptations that we undergo, the way we try to navigate in the world so that we can survive, those survival mechanisms may help us in the moment so that we can survive. But then we find ourselves 5, 10, 50 years later, and those survival mechanisms are actually holding us captive. They're holding us back from our true potential. And so you need the emotional intelligence and the intellectual honesty to own it, to finally say, this is my life and I'm ready to live it with gusto. And that's when you start to really emancipate yourself from that mental slavery. That's where your redemption comes in. And I'm not saying you do it all on your own. Yes, sometimes you need a therapist, a coach, or a tribe, a community like this, full of mentors and light workers who are holding this space and holding you in this highest vision. But above all of the people and above all of the gurus, sorry, my little video froze, above all of the gurus, above all of the self-help books, including mine, above all of the techniques, the sovereign spirit, that spirit of the highest self, that part of you that's connected to God, that trumps all. If you connect with your spirit and have that intellectual honesty to say, I want to live in alignment with the highest vision for myself, then we bring this new awareness and this new lens to look at our life and the patterns, and yes, the drama and trauma and karma of the past, to finally learn those lessons so that we can go above and beyond. And that's what it's about. And yes, Janet says, this is about acceptance. Own your truth. There is so much power, right, Janet? I mean, there's so much power when you finally either verbalize it. I recommend people do journaling to just get this stuff out of your head and your heart so that you can see it and, yes, recognize it and own it. Because when you own your truth, then you step into the driver's seat, or you pick up that pen and you become the author of your own heroic life journey. You know, in all of the workshops that I teach, the speaker training and the life writing courses, it's always about who are you being? And if you're coming from the level of your source, of that highest self, then you realize, I'm no longer a victim, and I get to rewrite my life story. And I get to right the wrongs. I get to heal and go beyond. And right now I am on a serious mission. You're gonna see I've just recorded today, that's why I got this pink lipstick on. I recorded today 2 videos about the Real Self-Love movement and about this new book series coming out. And my whole thinking is, I don't want to just put a Band-Aid on things. I don't want to just lift you up and rah, make you feel good. I want you fully empowered so that you rise up and you go beyond the pain and the trauma. You even go beyond surviving into thriving. So you're not labeling yourself as a survivor of this. You're not labeling yourself as a recovering that. You're not labeling yourself with a disease. You're saying, I'm going to rewrite my life story as the I am presence of the divine that gets to declare who you are, who you will be in this lifetime going forward. That's the power we have. That's the true essence of free will that we've been given. So, Shamoni, I'm glad to see you here. You say, we don't even realize where some of our current drives come from. Sometimes we're still being driven by outdated survival responses to earlier wrongly perceived events and decisions. Ain't that the truth? So this is why I'm so passionate about it, because I think a lot of people, I noticed, were getting stuck in this cycle of not just the pity party, but just this cycle of, yeah, I'm working on it. And I'm like, okay, you've been working on that same kind of issue for a while. And believe me, I'm not calling you out, because there have been plenty of times and areas in my life where I had the same lesson. And I'm like, really? I didn't learn that lesson yet? But there comes a moment when you're like, okay, I'm just going to dig in. I was telling my daughter about, this is a couple of years ago, she was kind of like frustrated about her handwriting analysis. You know, this was like the 3rd grade. And I said, you know what? I was actually the same way. And she's like, but your handwriting is so pretty and you do all these neat swirly things. But I can remember being in the 1st grade and Mrs. Serber literally came up behind me. I so remember her looking over my work, and I had not gotten any gold stars. I got all these things. And she looked at me and she said, you know, you could really do much better if you would just take your time. Like, that's all she said. There was no evil, there was no judgment in it. She was just like, just take your time. Because I would just be like sloppily running through stuff just so I could get on to the next. And when I just took that in and I sat down and like took my time and looked at, you know how they have all the lines and you got to stay within the lines and there's a little dotted line in the middle. And then sure enough, the very next writing evaluation, I had gold stars down the page. And it was one of those things that it's like, when you finally say, I'm just going to actually apply myself to this, like seriously, not haphazardly, half-assedly, if that's even a word, like to really finally say, let me bring that intellectual honesty and integrity to this, where I'm going to dig in and find out what's holding me back. Now, I am also on a mission this year. We're doing some serious work on a very deep level of clearing the past drama and trauma and karma. Because over the last, I'd say 5 years, working with different people from the network of transformational leaders, new people that I've met at the European Transformational Teachers Gathering, people like Sister Jenna and the other experts I've been connecting with at Peace Village and America Meditating. Like, I've spent enough time with the experts and then writing and working with different artists and writers and authors from around the world, and all of this stuff about resilience and post-traumatic growth and all these modalities. And even though we found a lot of things that work, I am really feeling like it's time for us to go deeper. And yes, Shimoni, the drama, trauma, and karma, it's like the triple threat. And it's like, those are the areas that if we get down to the root cause, that's what, I think that's what attracted me first to Chinese medicine. Because when I first started hearing about the whole principle, that it was totally different than the allopathic medicine, which is just treating symptoms, putting a Band-Aid on things. The Chinese system was really about finding out what was the energetic cause for whatever symptom was manifesting. You know, understanding how the energy impacts our body, our mind, our heart, our bioenergetic field. And this idea that we could actually get to the root cause, I was like, boom! Because how many of my clients would be put on medication? Now, that could be medication for addiction, insomnia, anxiety, depression, even the autoimmune conditions. They're being on all these immune suppressants and all this stuff. And what was jacked up about it was you'd see they'd get on one drug, and that would create more symptoms, and they'd have to get on another drug, and even sometimes that would create symptoms, and sometimes the next drug interacted with the previous drug, and it was so complicated. And the elegance of the traditional Chinese medical system was more like, you know, just give you stuff that just calms your symptoms and then creates more. Let's get down to the root cause energetically. And when I really started to dig in and understand that some of the patients that were coming to me, even with acupuncture or Chinese medicine or traditional medicine or surgery or psychotherapy, if I noticed that there was just something lingering in the back of their subconscious mind or in their bioenergetic field, meaning whatever drama, trauma, or karma they brought to the situation. It didn't matter what we did in the present moment. If it was just a Band-Aid or not addressing the root cause, you're only going to give them temporary symptomatic relief. And that, what bothered me about that was because then they were in a cycle of just maintaining. It was like, okay, let me just keep this disease at bay. And it leads to kind of a mediocre existence where they might mount enough energy to kind of do some project, or they have a baby, or they get through grad school, but they're never fully up there because they're still having to manage this stuff going on in the back. And we waste so much energy fighting and resisting and trying to suppress all of these signs and symptoms, which are pointing, if we listen to them, they are pointing to where we really need to address things. And that was a tough thing for me to accept, because being trained in America with the traditional medical system, where everybody wants to know it's evidence-based and there's, you know, scientific studies, how do you scientifically show that you can heal karma? Now, we know we can heal trauma because now we have brain scans. We know that, these frontal lobes, our prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, the hippocampus, we know specific parts of the brain that are impacted with trauma. And we're not just talking just the big traumas, like you've witnessed somebody commit something terrible, or you've lost someone, or you've been caring for a sick loved one, and that ongoing stress creates trauma that affects the brain. We're even talking about the micro traumas, those little digs from that mean boss, or that mean bully on the playground, or that constant fear that someone's going to judge you, or the fear that we're judging ourselves. That also impacts the brain. So now that we can see these things on brain scans, and we know that we can reverse those changes, even things like cognitive decline that happens with, say, Alzheimer's disease. Like, we know we can measure things like telomeres, or the telomerase enzyme. And these are the things that create these little end caps on our DNA, so that when our cells divide, that DNA gets replicated nicely instead of a bad copy that leads to either cancer or an aging, dying cell. Like, we can literally measure this. You can measure telomeres. We can measure the inflammatory processes in the body. We can measure the brain and its capacity for regeneration. It's plastic, right? So we can measure all of that. But this is where we get back to Romeo Cornal. So if Romeo, who is explaining that there are these Afro descendants, when some of these Africans were taken to various colonies, not just America, but various colonies and islands, there were some that became enslaved and took on the slave mentality. And there were others who resisted, and other indigenous cultures around the world who may not have been enslaved, but they also were not completely subdued by the colonials. So the indigenous in Australia, the indigenous in South America, for example. There are certain peoples of the world who have resisted the enslavement or the socialization. And the reason that I'm going to all this great lengths to kind of dig into it, and the reason that it's important for us, is because we know that we inherit a sort of cultural consciousness. We don't necessarily have to even be born in the same family, and yet twins, for example, who were separated at birth and ended up with two different adoptive families, start to exhibit very similar things to their birth parents. And some of that's triggered by environments, but some of it you wonder, well, gosh, if they didn't grow up around that cultural attitude, how did they get it? So part of it, yes, it's encoded in our genes, but it's also recognizing that we live in this bioenergetic matrix of energy and information that gets encoded into us. And yes, our soul carries those imprints into successive lifetimes. Now, how do we measure that? As a scientist, can I take a karma scan? Can I scan and discover, your past life karma? Now, there are people who do like Akashic records. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. People who will take you into past lives, or they can take you to something called the Akashic record, which is almost like the book of life with all your past lives. And you could go there to find out, okay, why is it I react so strongly to a certain situation? And lo and behold, you go into the Akashic records and you discover that there was a traumatic experience in one of your past lives. And the imprint of that imprint has been encoded onto the soul. And that soul essence that travels with us through subsequent lifetimes means that we're going to experience that in the here and now. And so, oh my God, what do? You can't go to your doctor and say, hey, the reason I've got this irritable bowel syndrome, or the reason this Lyme disease is taking over, is because I've got some past life karma I got to deal with. How many of your doctors would look at you like, okay, we are going to call the loony bin and get you taken away, the white coats, right? So Romeo says, the root cause is also a moment we stop to love our authentic self, to approve of our authentic self, and to prefer our authentic self, and congratulate our authentic self. Yes, and Romeo says, we forget that we're actually free. We think we're prisoners. So absolutely. Janet says, I'm so where you are. Was going to get to the root cause and come out from the comfort with drama and trauma. And yeah, I'm glad you brought up this idea of comfort, because this idea, and Romeo talks about this a lot, this idea of stepping into the unknown, stepping into the void, is scary. And one of your other co-authors with Dr. Janet and Romeo in the book Time to Rise is Todd Malloy. And he talks about this idea that we got to get comfortable in the uncomfortable. So this idea that even though we're sick, or we're in a bad job, or we're in a bad relationship, we want to break free, but the unknown is scary. Leaving behind the comfort, although painful comfort, of that current situation, it requires an enormous amount of courage. It requires an enormous amount of support. And that's, again, why I'm doing all that I'm doing for you, to connect us around the world. Because if your home community or your family or your country is not embracing you and giving you the opportunity to express and be and live as your authentic self, well, we can do that for you. We can connect you. Hey, Fleming, I know you know what I'm talking about, like this tribe, right? Like this idea that we see each other, we hear each other, we feel each other, we uplift each other. It's so empowering. And that's, again, why in 2018, I will be hosting more events with many of the people that you're hearing me talk about and talk to in these interviews, so that we can come together, you know, some in the United States, the UK, Iceland, Denmark, Southern France, so that people can start to create these bonds. And every one of the events that we did last year, new friendships, new relationships and business partnerships have sprouted. But the most important thing is that we now know we're not alone and we can connect. So Shimoni says, so are you saying that when we experience trauma, the impact of that can be encoded in our genes and passed on to other generations? Yes, my darling, that is exactly what we're talking about. The trauma that we experience, our environments in general, impact our gene expression, which means, so this is the field of epigenetics, okay? And again, this is fortunately something that has been proven, and we can, you know, see the reproducible effects of it. And, you know, at its best, if you just look at skin color, we all derive from one family, came from the continent of Africa. But based on where our ancestors migrated to, some people have pale skin, pale hair, pale eyes, and others are, you know, deep, dark, delicious black, right? That is, we all have these impact of the environment. The impact of the sun affects the gene expression of melanin, or the lack thereof, right? So, so yes, in the grandest sense, this idea about epigenetics means that what we experience and our perception of our environment and our power or lack thereof, it absolutely affects our gene expression. Stress, we know, turns on certain genes, causes us to spit out cortisol. You know, our whole physiology changes. So that's why we know that if a mother who's been stressed, who's been on drugs, or exposed to violence, her hormones will impact the gene expression of her child. And that's just in utero. But imagine that you come from a culture that has been enslaved or subjugated to all sorts of torture. There are these phenotypic expressions that will be seen in subsequent generations. And, you know, it's why we can start to see certain people become hoarders. And it's like, wait a minute, you live in an abundant universe, and I'm not just talking about spiritually, right? We know that we have enough food, You know, even for the poorest people, there's enough food. You could eat rice and Cheerios and you'll still be fit, right? But yet they've got this mentality of scarcity. So this scarcity consciousness that's impacting the way that even it affects the gene expression in terms of how our bodies use energy, meaning we either hoard and store those calories because our body is afraid that we're not going to get that next meal, and that leads to this obesity. You know, when I was teaching in California, and Karina Virginia, my co-facilitator at this lovely retreat that we did, the Inner Bliss Retreat, she was sharing with the participants this story about these rats. Now, I don't like rat studies. This is in the past, but anyway, there were some rats that were given some flour. I don't remember which flour it was, but they associated this flour with like treats, and it was great. So they ate them, and they just had this flour, and it was, you know, wonderful. Then they associated a traumatic shock with every time that the second group ate the flour, they had a traumatic shock. Now then they looked at the offspring of the rats that were conditioned to find the flour a positive experience, and the offspring of the rats that got a shock when they ate these. And they looked at their babies, and then these little babies were presented with the same flour. And those that had a positive experience went for it. They just loved up that flour. The babies whose parents had experienced a shock avoided those flours like the plague. So how did that happen? It's a behavioral preference or aversion transmitted from, you know, this idea that our genes are turned on, our genetic expression is impacted by what we see and experience. And yeah. So Romeo says, not only can we do it, but I also believe that it is a moral duty for future generations. I'm with you. And Ebony, I'm so glad that community is your strength. I'm glad that you've chosen this community, and we are here for you. Yay! And we got so much more coming for you this year. I'm just so inspired, so inspired to be able to connect with many of you in person. We're doing so many more events that will allow us to connect. So long events, intensive retreats, where you can really do some unloading of karma, drama, and trauma, and even shorter events. The beautiful Helena Philipson is going to be hosting Food Freedom Days. So for people who really need to break free from whatever the drama is associated with food, whether that's binging, purging, abusing, what have you. So short events, like a one-day event, where you can get these intensives. The lovely Cécile Braille, who is in Monaco, Monte Carlo, she's partly to thank for me having a voice. She heard me on Facebook Live. Hey Cécile, salut. Si bien que tu es là. I was like complaining about allergies, and she was like, oh, I have somebody good for you. And I'm like, went to see this old school doc, and yes, sometimes even Andrea is like, okay, we got to get to the bottom of this. So that helped a lot. And then Romeo did this magical, I didn't tell you this, Romeo. I spoke to Romeo today. So here's what I'm saying. The reason why I love connecting us is Romeo was telling me about somebody who had a terrible allergy to vanilla. And he said, Andrea, I had this technique, shared it with the client, and like, I don't know, a week or so later, he gets this message from the client saying, oh, I just had the most fabulous vanilla ice cream. And Romeo's like, that's nice, big deal. He had forgotten, right, Romeo? You said you kind of like forgot. And he's like, oh, wow, that fast. I mean, she had the type of allergy that causes that anaphylactic shock, right? So I didn't tell you this, Romeo, but for the last 2 days, I've been like ripping and running, finally feeling good enough to run errands. And do you hear? Do you hear any snotting and sneezing? So I got the symptomatic relief by seeing the doctor last weekend. It was like, I gotta be able to breathe and sleep. And then Romeo did some little magical stuff, which maybe he'll explain. And yeah, I didn't have any drama. And I tell you, y'all, if you could see the south of France right now with all of this mimosa pollen, it's quite a trip. So this is what our focus is on, is really getting to the root cause energetically, spiritually, to clear the drama and the trauma of the past. So yeah, there you have it. And yes, I believe it's also a moral duty to do this for the future generations. I don't want to be carrying any drama, trauma, and karma and then infecting people with that. It's like, just like, I don't want to be in a bad mood and just bleh on people. And so I hope if you haven't already joined Yvette Taylor's thing, let's see if I can pull up the link for you, then I would say get started, because it just started today. The energy alignment method, this study that she's doing is really going to actually allow us to take part in learning the energy alignment method, applying it to a specific issue in your life, and yes, even the stuff about clearing past karma. She won't say that out loud because it's more like people just want to like clear the basics. But this is deep, profound work, y'all. I don't know if that would work. Let's see if this works. I need to get the link from Yvette. Oh my goodness. Because I think I have a long, you know how it is sometimes. You got a long link. I'm going to find it. I would love to see you over there, because every day this week, we will get a new set of videos to take you through this 5 days of experiencing the energy alignment. And I am so loving it, because it's, as I said, I mentioned it in my book, and it's one of those things that we finally can help people like get past their stuff, like for real. Now I'm talking for real. So let's see. I think that's not too long a link. So click on over there and join us in this 5 days of experiencing, putting the alignment of our head, our heart, and our hara, so that we can manifest some juicy, delicious stuff in this life of ours. Listen, my friends, I'm committed to getting off of here now. It's 42 minutes. Still less than an hour. I did it. And yeah, there it is. So Michael, thanks for joining us. You'll have to watch the replay. This was a juicy one. We kind of dove deep into a lot of stuff because I've been saving it up for y'all, you know, with being sick and being on travel. I'm super excited to connect with you. So check out the interview with Romeo Cornal. You'll find the video version of it, and it's also in French, Cécile et tout le monde. You can look at the video in French. Join us for Yvette's Energy Alignment Method study for 5 days of increasing your sense of flow. And be on the lookout, because in the next 2 days, you're going to see a video inviting people to participate in my next group book. That's right. You can become a published author this year by co-authoring my next book. In fact, we have a series called Life After, Life Rewritten. And the first one in the series is Life After Love, Sex, and Relationship Trauma, which could include anything from love addiction, sex addiction, codependency, a history of trauma or abuse. We want to show that people can, boom, move beyond and really thrive. And then later in the year, in the Life After series, the Life Rewritten series, we will talk about life after divorce, or life after bankruptcy, or life after loss, life after surviving suicide. So if you know anyone who has a personal story and you think that they might want to participate in this author-funded group book, there's tons of perks. tons of opportunities to reach people all around the world. And I know Romeo and many of the other authors will tell you it's been quite a trip. It is a personal transformational journey. I ain't gonna lie, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. And the other thing is you'll also see a video coming out this week about the real self-love movement. So this is totally free to join. It's for everyone. It's something that I talk about a lot in this book, I Love You Me. The real self-love movement involves a free online community, and we are inviting many of the experts and teachers and healers that I've been working with for the last few years to share free master classes to support you in really integrating this idea of real self and real self-love. And it will include meetups online as well as live events. So be on the lookout for those as well. I hope this has been helpful for you. I know this is kind of a weird time of day for me to be posting, but I've been shooting all day, and that is just how we roll. So I wish you a fabulous rest of your Wednesday, and I look forward to connecting with you again. Remember, my friends, you are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love. Bye.